granted the Asset Forfeiture Unit of the National Prosecuting Authority a preservation order to freeze a bank account suspected to be involved in defrauding the Unemployed Insurance Fund. To tell us more about this is Sipho Ngwema, National Spokesperson of the NPA. Very good evening to you, Mr. Ngwema. Thank you so much for speaking to us. So, in this case, are we speaking about one account or are we speaking about several accounts that are being targeted?
Good evening and thanks for having us. In fact, the money initially went to one account in the name of one Thokozani Mchunu, but then it was distributed to a number of accounts, including a number of stock files, where we think that it was a way of laundering the money into many other accounts.
And those individuals who received the money, were they complicit? Were they aware that these funds were being funneled into their account?
We are investigating. The South African Police Service is investigating, but our suspicion is that the people involved, they knew about it and hence they participated in the laundering of the money, but that investigation continues.
Okay, we'll talk about the charges in just a moment that are being investigated. But so it's been alleged that an amount of 692,185 was fraudulently or mistakenly paid into that bank account, which is registered in Mchunu's name. But have you still not established if this was intentional or not?
As I said, the South African Police Service is investigating. We're all working together under the Collaborative Center. But as I said, the suspicion is that every person who was involved, including the money that we suspect went into Mchunu's account fraudulently, it was a scheme that would have been cooked amongst them. But that investigation continues and it should be concluded fairly soon.
Okay, so the National Adhesive Distributors themselves, did they not know, or do they know why at least the COVID-19 relief funds were not deposited into their account?
They didn't know, hence they alerted the police. And number two, Mr. Mchunu neither works for them or the Unemployment Insurance Fund. So the money was not supposed to go to his account. Is not linked to any of the entities that are involved in the transaction. And hence the company alerted law enforcement and everybody lurched into it to make sure that the accounts are frozen. The investigation now from the criminal aspect is continuing. Asset Forfeiture, as you said earlier, has frozen the accounts. So they will then move to make sure that the accounts are forfeited permanently to the state.
Mr. Ngwema, you have said that you are working in collaboration with the SABC, but just expand a little for us in terms of, from a legal perspective, those charges or allegations that are being investigated of fraud or theft or money laundering. As in, what are you looking at these individuals having done beyond the surface of the money being put into Mr. Mchunu's account? When you talk about money laundering, to what end, etc.?
In terms of what we have seen, you must remember this is the second case now that is dealt with by the structure that is overlooking any misuse of funds related to the COVID-19. What happens, and this is the modus operandi that we have noticed now, is that the money goes into account of one person. That person immediately distributes that account to a number of other accounts. So firstly, the money goes into one account unlawfully. So either that money is stolen or is done so fraudulently. So that's the first investigation, is to ascertain exactly what is the transgression. As I said, the suspicion is that it's either theft or fraud. And from there, the money is hidden, is disguised in stock files. It's sent into a number of other accounts linked to Mr. Mchunu. And that act, in terms of the law, is money laundering in terms of Prevention of Organized Crime Act. So those are the offenses that are being investigated by the South African Police Service. And I think I must emphasize again the fact that this is a structure involving all law enforcement agencies. So if there's anything that anyone has to be involved, everybody looks into it, because the structure's main mandate is to make sure that any money that has to do with relief funds is not abused. So it's an oversight function which has a bird's eye view on corruption that has to do with any relief fund connected to COVID-19.
I want to talk about the fact that you say this is the second incident that's been dealt with. Is there suspicion that if the modus operandi is similar, that there actually could be a syndicate involved, or these individuals in these two separate cases working together?
That is what the investigation wants to establish now. So at the appropriate time, we will make the announcement through the actions that we are going to take, that are going to take place, so that the public and the courts will be aware of exactly what are the facts in relation to this particular case. This is why, as I said, the South African Police Service is investigating. Of course, the money was frozen between the Financial Services Center and the Asset Forfeiture Unit. But at the end, remember with the first case, the accused are out now on bail after they were arrested. But it will only be at the end of this investigation where we'll be able to understand whether or not is there any connection between the initial incident or the initial offense and the second one now, which we have uncovered. So that information will be able to be available once the investigation has been concluded.
So finally, the FAU has applied for the preservation order to permanently forfeit the money to the state. So will the funds eventually be redirected to the intended beneficiaries, and when?
That decision will be taken once the matter is finalized and once all the facts in relation to the case are known, but it is possible, it's one of the options, that the money may be taken back to the victim, and in this particular case is the Department of Labor, or it may be forfeited to the states, but that will be determined by the facts that will come out of the investigation or at the end of the investigation, so that it can inform the decision what to do with the money that has been frozen.
All right, thank you so much, Sipho Ngwema, National Spokesperson of the National Prosecuting Authority.